In this video, I'll show you how to take the cold plunge frame that we just built and wrap it with a moisture barrier. If you just stumbled across this video, this is part of a cold plunge crash course that I'm working on how to build the DIY cold plunge that I made that lives outside year-round in Minnesota. You can follow along on other social channels like TikTok and Instagram, and I also have a private Facebook group filled with thousands of people that are building their own DIY cold plunge. I also send exclusive content to my email subscribers, and links to all that stuff is below. So let's get into this. So the framing is all done. Now it's time to wrap. For this step, we'll need a staple gun and some type of waterproof wrapping, whether it's a Tyvek house wrap, something like this that you can get for free if you visit like building sites or building material stores. These are the tarps that they use to cover building materials, whether it's a pallet of siding, 2x4s, other lumber, that sort of thing. They end up usually just throwing this stuff away. So if you ask around, you might be able to snag this for free. And with that, let's get to wrapping. This is really pretty simple. Just spread the entire wrap out, make sure that it can cover the entire frame, and then we'll start stapling. For me, it was easiest to pick a straight edge and use that on the front of the cold plunge. From there, start stapling and pull everything tight until you have a front panel that is fairly tight and secure. There's really no wrong way to do this. I chose to go on the top panel next, again just pulling to make sure everything's tight and stapling everywhere I could on the cross members and angled pieces of the frame. Once the front and top are secure, it's time to make our first cut. You'll see in a second here, but I cut straight up, basically 3/4 of an inch off of that vertical upright. Now I can pull that tarp straight across and get it nice and tight from the top down to the bottom. Once those staples are in, I'll take the scissors again and cut horizontally over to that vertical post, but I'll leave maybe like a 2 to 3 inch gap there to fold across that front side to staple in a minute. Then I'll go to the other side and pull that nice and tight, and again stapling from the top to the bottom, make that side panel as tight as I can. Now take the scissors to get rid of some of the excess tarp, cut straight across and then vertical, leaving again 3 to 4 inches to wrap around each side to make sure everything's covered. I found it to be easier if you slide a 2x4 underneath the frame just to give yourself some space to get that bottom row of staples on. Now it's kind of just like wrapping a present. Fold all of the edges around, secure them as best you can, and just go around the entire frame, keeping everything as tight as you possibly can. When that's all done, you can go around with the scissors and kind of clean up the bottom edge. The bottom of our frame is pressure treated lumber, so leaving this 1/4 to a 1/2 inch gap is going to be just fine. From here, it's time to rinse and repeat and do this on the opposite side. So again, cutting straight up, leaving a couple inches to wrap around the edge on both sides is what you're going to want to do. Stapling to keep the material tight and out of your way as needed. Same story here, trim away the excess and staple as you go. I got a little bit aggressive with that cut and there's a bigger gap than I wanted. It's not the end of the world, but have some patience and do a little bit better job than I did. At this point, you should have a neatly wrapped frame. Here's a full 360 look at all of the corners and where we're at so far. Now let's cut into this thing. Just feel around and see where your frame is. The first thing you'll want to do is cut a smaller rectangle than the opening of your mechanical area. Now cut some diagonals from the corner of the rectangle you just cut to the corner of the opening in your framing. Make sure to leave enough material to wrap down and under those 2x4s. From there, staple everything on as tight as you can. Now for the stock tank opening. Same concept here. At the end of the day, you want a smaller oval cut than the opening you have. From here, I'm cutting lines to each corner of all of those angled posts that we put in, and we'll fold everything under and staple it the same way we just did to the mechanical area. After this, we'll grab a tool that I forgot to mention, a trusty hammer. Go around and just tap in all of the staples that didn't fully sink into the frame. Once you do that, we're pretty much done here. Here are some quick detail shots of the corners. Obviously, you can see that there's 2x4 that's still exposed. This isn't a concern for me because we're going to be putting a top panel on, inserting the stock tank, and at the end of the project, running silicone to attach the stock tank to that top panel. But you can make your own call if you want to patch that up with excess material or not. At this point, I did a test fit with the stock tank, and as you can see, there's minimal concern for that space where the 2x4 wasn't wrapped. Here's a quick shot of some corners just so you guys can see This doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be as tight as you can get it. And again, it's pressure treated lumber on the bottom, so having that gap isn't a bad thing. It'll just make for a cleaner, finished look at the end. And of course, there's my oopsie. Avoid that if you can, but at the end of the day, I'm not super worried about it. Next up, we'll work on the top panel. We need to cut it to size and cut the hole for both the mechanical area and for the stock tank. From there, this project gets really fun. We'll cover all the plumbing fittings, hoses, and tubes that you'll need along with any other equipment. That's it for now. Follow along on all the different social channels and subscribe to my email newsletter to stay updated for the next video.